Hulk Hogan live stream funeral procession. This is heartbreaking. Wrestling fans around the world are mourning the heartbreaking loss of Hulk Hogan. In this emotional live stream, we follow the official funeral procession of the legendary WWE Hall of Famer, a man who defined an era of sports entertainment and inspired generations. Witness never-before-seen footage, heartfelt tributes, and the somber atmosphere as family, fans, and fellow wrestlers gather to say their final goodbye to the immortal one. From the streets lined with mourners to the moving eulogies, this video captures a raw and unforgettable moment in wrestling history. The mourning air was thick with silence. Not the kind of silence that simply fills space, but one that carries the weight of a million broken hearts. On this day, the world stood still. The streets of Tampa, Florida, usually alive with sunshine and laughter, were now draped in shadows. Fans, families, and figures from every corner of the wrestling world had gathered here, not to cheer, but to mourn. The immortal one was gone. Hulk Hogan, the icon who brought color to countless childhoods and strength to so many struggling souls, was being laid to rest. His body might have stopped, but his spirit, forever etched into the fabric of wrestling history, roared louder than ever. Cameras were already rolling as the procession began to move. The live stream flickered onto millions of screens across the globe. Fans tuned in from Tokyo, Lagos, London, New York, Sao Paulo, cities whose people may have never shared a language, but who all spoke the same emotion today: grief. For many, Hulk Hogan wasn't just a wrestler. He was a larger-than-life superhero. A father figure on TV. A source of strength when life felt too heavy. And now, as the camera followed the slow-moving hearse draped in the American flag, silence swept over the WWE universe like a tidal wave. Even the commentators, those voices we so often heard screaming with excitement, were quiet now, their tones hushed and reverent, as if words themselves could not carry the weight of this moment. His casket, custom-made and adorned with red and yellow trim, bore the unmistakable symbols of Hogan's legacy. The word immortal was engraved across the top in bold, golden letters. But it wasn't just about a man who once tore shirts apart in the ring. No, this funeral procession was about something deeper. About saying goodbye to an era. About laying to rest the hopes, dreams, and glory days that once made professional wrestling feel like pure magic. And, perhaps most painfully, it was about watching our heroes grow old and eventually leave us. As the hearse moved through the heart of Tampa, fans lined the streets, standing shoulder to shoulder, many of them holding hand-painted signs. "Thank you, Hulkster. You're still my champion. What you gonna do when we miss you forever?" Some fans were dressed in full Hogan cosplay, bandanas, handlebar mustaches, feather boas. Others clutched worn-out action figures from their childhood. One elderly man, in tears, held up an original Hulkamania shirt, its edges frayed and yellowed with time. Another mother quietly wiped tears from her eyes as her son, too young to know who Hogan truly was, waved a small WWE flag. And then, almost as if the wind itself remembered his roar, the crowd began to softly chant, "Hogan! Hogan! Hogan!" It wasn't long before the live stream cut to the church where the funeral would take place. A grand, serene cathedral bathed in sunlight, its stained glass windows depicting scenes of angels and warriors. Inside, the pews were already filled with familiar faces. Vince McMahon sat near the front, visibly shaken, his usual stern demeanor replaced by raw sorrow. Triple H, in a dark navy suit, had his head bowed, his hand resting gently on the shoulder of Stephanie McMahon. The Undertaker, stoic as ever, wore his classic black trench coat, no words, just presence. Ric Flair, tears streaming down his face, clutched a tissue as he stared ahead at the altar, his memories likely racing back through decades of battles and brotherhood. The eulogies began with a soft piano playing in the background. Brooke Hogan, his daughter, was the first to speak. She stood at the podium, hands trembling, but her voice strong. "My dad wasn't perfect," she said, "but he was ours. And no matter what mistakes he made, he always tried to be a hero. Not just in the ring, but to me, to my brother, to our family. And to all of you. Her voice cracked slightly, and the crowd held their breath. When he was sick, when the end was near, he told me one thing. He said, "I hope the world remembers that I gave them my heart. My whole damn heart." And with that, she stepped back, barely able to hold back her tears. Following Brooke, several legends took the stage. Bret Hart recalled their fierce rivalry and admitted, through choked-up words, "Even in our darkest feuds, I respected the hell out of him." Stone Cold Steve Austin shared a story about seeing Hogan backstage in the late 2000s. "He came up to me, slapped me on the back, and said, 'Brother, you still got it.' I looked him dead in the eye and said, 'So do you, old man.' That was the last time we laughed together. Damn, I wish we had more." But perhaps the most haunting eulogy came from John Cena. Dressed in a simple black suit, his face looked visibly aged not from time, but from the burden of goodbye. I remember watching him on TV as a kid. The first time I saw him lift Andre the Giant, it made me believe anything was possible. And when I met him in real life, he told me I reminded him of himself. I didn't know what to say. I still don't. I just hope I lived up to that." Cena paused, his eyes locking with Hogan's casket. "Rest easy, big man. You changed the world." Outside the cathedral, the fans continued to gather, hundreds now swelling into thousands. The crowd overflowed into neighboring blocks, the city seemingly shutting down to honor one man. WWE officials had set up massive monitors for people to watch the ceremony from outside. Some were sobbing. Some were quietly holding hands. Some stood in stunned silence, simply trying to process the moment. The camera cut to unseen footage, a montage of Hogan's final days, never-before-shared moments taken from private home videos and hospital visits. One showed Hogan in a hospital bed, smiling weakly as Brooke and Nick held his hands. Another showed Vince McMahon sitting by Hogan's side, both men sharing an unspoken bond forged over 4 decades. There was footage of Hogan watching old WrestleMania tapes, laughing softly and mumbling, "We did good, huh?" It was raw, intimate, and profoundly human. No persona. No larger-than-life character. Just Terry Bollea. Just a man at the end of his road. And then came the final shot, one that will be burned into the hearts of fans forever. As the casket was carried out of the church by WWE legends, Triple H, Ric Flair, John Cena, Randy Orton, The Undertaker, and even Shane McMahon, the theme of Real Americans softly played through the cathedral organ. The moment felt surreal. Chills ran down the spine of every person watching. From kids who grew up on Hulkamania to older fans who watched the birth of WrestleMania, the sound of that music, in this context, was devastating. The hearse began its final journey to the burial site, and the crowd followed. Some barefoot. Some singing. Some just walking quietly, hand in hand with strangers who, just for this moment, felt like family. There were no chants now. No roars. Just one sound, a unified, collective grief. The kind of grief that follows legends. The kind that only comes when someone who once seemed invincible finally falls. And yet, amidst all the pain, there was a strange, almost spiritual beauty to the moment. Because in this funeral procession, in this final goodbye, the world wasn't just mourning what was lost. They were honoring what had been given. Decades of memories. Of inspiration. Of moments that made us believe in heroes, even when the world around us didn't. That was the power of Hulk Hogan. Not just the wrestler, but the myth, the movement, the man. As the funeral procession moved from the cathedral toward the burial site, a sacred hush fell over the city. It was as if the world had pressed pause. The hearse led the way, escorted by a slow-moving cavalcade of limousines, motorbikes, and blacked-out SUVs, each carrying friends, family members, and WWE legends whose lives had been forever shaped by the man in the casket. Police officers flanked the path, not just to maintain order, but out of respect. They stood tall, saluting as the Immortal One made his final journey through the very streets where his legend was born. Drone cameras from WWE's official live stream soared overhead, capturing every breathtaking angle. Below, a sea of mourners moved in waves, many still wearing red and yellow to honor the man who once taught them how to believe in themselves. Some were singing his theme song under their breath. Others were clutching programs from the funeral service, which featured Hogan's most iconic image on the cover, his finger pointed forward, his muscles flexed, eyes wide with that unmistakable passion. Underneath the photo was a single phrase: train. Say your prayers. Eat your vitamins. Believe in yourself. That motto, once a simple line from wrestling promos, had become gospel to an entire generation. Now, as fans whispered it to one another like a sacred mantra, it carried the weight of legacy. The kind of legacy few ever achieve. A boy standing on his father's shoulders reached high into the air, holding a cardboard cutout of Hogan's championship belt. The crowd beneath him erupted into quiet applause, and for a brief moment, smiles pierced the sadness. Because that's what Hulk Hogan did, he brought joy. Even in death, he gave people a reason to stand taller. The burial site had been prepared on a private estate outside Tampa, peaceful, secluded, surrounded by palm trees that gently swayed in the Florida breeze. A massive white tent had been set up for close family and friends, while large video screens streamed the event to those outside. WWE security staff moved solemnly around the area, guiding guests with care. There were no backstage passes today. No VIP lounges. Just one shared feeling, loss.as. The casket was lowered from the hearse by the same 6 pallbearers who carried it from the church. Time seemed to stop. No one spoke. No one moved. The only sound was the gentle rustling of palm leaves and the occasional sniffle from a grieving fan or family member. And then came the bagpipes. Slow, haunting, beautiful. Played by a single piper in full regalia, the sound echoed across the burial site like a memory drifting through time. It was not just a song, it was a farewell. A melody woven with pain, gratitude, and eternal respect. The officiant began the final rites, his voice calm but heavy. We gather here today not to bury a man, but to lift up a legend. To celebrate the life of Terry Eugene Bollea, who to the world was known as Hulk Hogan, but to his family was simply dad, husband, brother, friend. He paused, taking in the sight of a community shattered by grief. He was strength when we felt weak. He was hope when we saw none. And he was a light in a world that often forgot how to shine. More tributes followed. Linda Hogan, his former wife, stepped forward, her face lined with years of history, both beautiful and broken. She spoke softly, tears falling with every word. No matter what happened between us, he gave me 2 beautiful children. And for that, I will always love him. Always. Then came Nick Hogan. His voice trembled. He wasn't just a wrestling star. He was my dad. And even in his worst moments, I never stopped wanting to make him proud. Brooke reappeared, placing a single red rose atop the casket before stepping back into her mother's arms, and then, silence again. The camera panned across the crowd, every face etched with emotion. Batista stood with his arms folded, eyes red. Sasha Banks clutched a handkerchief to her lips. Randy Orton, looking lost in thought, whispered something no microphone could catch. Even Roman Reigns, ever the tribal chief, looked visibly shaken, his hand resting on his chest like a salute to the warrior who came before him. Suddenly, the sound of a 10-bell salute began, echoing slowly, powerfully, across the estate. Each toll was a punch to the soul. With every chime, fans across the globe watching the live stream fell deeper into mourning. Some sobbed. Some stood at attention. Others knelt beside televisions, candles lit, their rooms darkened like shrines to the man who once made them believe in power, in pride, in possibility. As the final bell tolled, Triple H stepped forward with one last message. His voice cracked but remained steady. There will never be another like Hulk Hogan. He didn't just carry WWE, he was WWE. And we will honor him every time we step into that ring. Because without him, there is no us. He paused, gazing at the casket. You carried us on your back, brother. Now rest. And with that, the casket was gently lowered into the ground. Slowly, reverently. As it disappeared from sight, an overhead screen showed a reel of Hogan's greatest moments. Lifting Andre the Giant, ripping his shirt off, posing with kids, running down the ramp at WrestleMania, standing tall with blood on his face, but victory in his heart. The reel ended on a single image, Hogan, mid-ring, pointing at the camera, with those final words spoken in a soft, echoing voice. I love you, my Hulkamaniacs. Always have. Always will. Forever. Then, darkness, but it didn't last long. As the screen faded to black, a massive spotlight beamed upward from the burial site, lighting the sky with Hogan's unmistakable silhouette. A symbol. A final message to the world, that legends never die. That even in the deepest pain, greatness lives on. Back in the streets of Tampa, the fans began to move once more, not away from the site, but toward each other. Strangers embraced. Families hugged tighter. The grief that once felt crushing now bonded them. Hogan had given them more than memories. He had given them community. And today, in his death, that community stood stronger than ever. As the live stream began to wind down, commentators offered closing words through tears. This wasn't just a goodbye, one of them whispered. This was a thank you. A love letter from all of us, to the man who showed the world what it meant to fight. And then the screen faded to a soft final tribute. Just a black background with white text. Hulk Hogan 1953, 2025 forever immortal. Forever loved, the live stream ended. But the mourning had just begun. Across homes, arenas, and hearts all over the world, fans wept. They shared stories, posted tributes, rewatched matches, lit candles, played theme music. And above all, they remembered, because you don't forget your heroes, especially not one who made you believe that the power of Hulkamania could live forever. The day after the funeral, the world felt different. It wasn't just the wrestling community that was in mourning. It was everyone, athletes, celebrities, journalists, actors, and even politicians, offering their tributes to a man who had transcended the squared circle. Hulk Hogan's death wasn't merely the loss of a wrestling icon. It was the fading of a cultural beacon, someone who brought intensity, color, fire, and heart to an era that desperately needed heroes. Social media flooded with memorials. Instagram was blanketed with old photographs of fans meeting Hogan backstage. Twitter trended with hashtags like #ThankYouHogan, #ImmortalForever, and #RIPHulk. On TikTok, users of all ages recreated iconic moments from Hogan's matches, ripping shirts, doing the ear cup taunt, and shouting, "What ya gonna do?" in teary-eyed tribute. Even rival wrestling promotions suspended their feuds and storylines, dedicating entire segments to the man who helped build the industry they now thrive in. Back at WWE headquarters in Stamford, Connecticut, flags were flown at half-mast. The corporate offices observed a 10-minute silence at noon, during which monitors around the building lit up with a still image of Hogan, arms wide, championship belt in hand, bathed in spotlight. For the executives who had known him personally and the young interns who'd only ever watched him in old footage, there was a mutual understanding. This man wasn't just part of the company's history. He was the company's heartbeat. WWE announced that the next edition of Monday Night Raw would be a full memorial show dedicated solely to Hogan's legacy. Titled Immortal Forever, a tribute to Hulk Hogan, the show would be broadcast from Madison Square Garden, the very arena where Hogan had once body-slammed giants and electrified audiences for decades. Tickets sold out within minutes. Fans lined up overnight just to be part of the energy, to chant one more time, and to feel connected with their childhood hero. Back in Tampa, his gravesite became an impromptu pilgrimage destination. Fans flew in from all over the world: Japan, Canada, Mexico, Germany. Some arrived in full Hulkamania gear. Others wore black. Flowers, candles, and championship belts piled at the base of the memorial stone, which had already been inscribed with his iconic quote, "To all my Hulkamaniacs, I love you. Train hard. Pray harder. Never give up." The grave itself was protected by a subtle iron gate adorned with gold bolts. But even in death, there was no sense of separation. Fans knelt just feet away, touching the gate as if it were the man himself. One woman left behind a letter wrapped in a faded ticket from WrestleMania 3. Another man, a veteran, stood for hours in silence before finally whispering, "You got me through the war, brother." And then he walked away. Brooke Hogan, visibly moved by the outpouring of love, released a statement through her publicist. It read, "Our family is overwhelmed with gratitude for the love and respect shown to our father. He may have been a hero to the world, but to us, he was simply Dad. We miss him beyond words. But seeing how deeply he touched the lives of others reminds us that his legacy truly is immortal. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts." Meanwhile, a camera crew working on a posthumous documentary had started collecting footage. WWE had already green-lit the project, a full-length tribute titled Hulk, the man behind the mania. The film promised rare footage from Hogan's early days, interviews with those who knew him best, and personal moments never seen by the public. The premiere would coincide with SummerSlam weekend, where a Hall of Fame induction would be held once more, this time posthumously, placing Hogan into the newly created Legacy Immortals category for those who had shared the ring with him. The loss was heavier than words. Ric Flair admitted in an emotional sit-down interview, "I've lost a brother. Not just a friend, not a coworker, a damn brother. We bled together. We lived together. We were the business together." He broke down mid-sentence and needed a moment to collect himself. The Undertaker, rarely one to open up publicly, posted a single black-and-white photo of himself and Hogan from the early 90s. No caption. Just the image, and somehow, it said more than words ever could. John Cena returned to the WWE Performance Center and gave a private seminar to the up-and-coming NXT stars. In that seminar, he didn't talk about moves, matches, or pay-per-view moments. He talked about character, about heart, and about Hogan. He taught us that strength doesn't come from how much you can lift or how loud you can shout. It comes from how many people you can inspire when you're down. That's what made him the icon. He lifted us when we didn't even know we needed lifting. Even The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, appeared on The Tonight Show and dedicated an entire segment to Hogan. "I loved that man," he told Jimmy Fallon. "He was the reason I ever dreamed of stepping into a ring. He gave me his blessing when I was just starting out. And when I made it to the top, I always carried his words with me. He said, 'Kid, if they believe in you like they believed in me, don't ever take that for granted.' I never did. And I never will." In schools, libraries, and gyms across America, tributes to Hogan went up. A public mural in downtown Tampa showed him flexing with a backdrop of fireworks, surrounded by cheering fans. The title read, "Immortal. Always." Elementary schools across Florida encouraged Hulkamania Day, where kids could wear red and yellow and talk about courage, discipline, and believing in yourself. But beyond the spectacle and the celebrations, there was still an unshakable void. Wrestling fans, especially those who grew up in the golden era, felt it in the silence after the funeral. It was in the empty ring now stored in Hogan's personal museum, in the unspoken emptiness, in every locker room across the globe. Wrestlers looked at their boots a little differently. They stepped into the ring with a little more reverence. Every promo, every pin, every victory now carried a little piece of his spirit, because if Hulk Hogan taught the world anything, it was that strength comes not from being invincible, but from being visible. From standing tall even when the world tries to knock you down. From turning pain into power. And from giving every fan in every city a reason to keep cheering. The final tribute came in the form of a global simulcast hosted by WWE and streamed on every major platform. For one night only, fans were invited to tune in and relive Hogan's greatest moments. The program was simple, no commercials, no commentary. Just matches, promos, backstage moments. His WrestleMania 6 face-off with the Ultimate Warrior. His unforgettable return to WWE in 2002. His first ever title win. His induction into the Hall of Fame, and at the end, his final match. Though years had passed since he last wrestled, Fans watched in stunned silence as the screen faded to a black and white recording of his last walk down the ramp. Every movement was slower, every breath deeper. But when he stood in that ring, flexed those arms, and cupped his ear to the crowd, the reaction was still thunderous. The final words spoken were not from a commentator. They were from Hogan himself, taken from a backstage segment recorded only months before his death. "I may be older now. Slower. Maybe the hair ain't there, and the muscles don't pop like they used to. But when I walk through that curtain, and I see my Hulkamaniacs, brother, I'm 21 again. Forever. That's what y'all gave me. Not fame. Not fortune. Forever." The feed ended with a slow fade to gold, and so the world began to move on, not to forget, but to carry forward. The echo of Hogan's voice would live on in arenas. His presence would be felt in every child who dreams of standing in that ring, in every underdog who learns to believe, in every chant that starts small and rises to shake the roof. He was the immortal one. He still is, and if you listen closely, in the silence, in the roar, in your heart, you can still hear him say, "What ya gonna do when Hulkamania lives on in you?" 1 week later, the sun began to rise over Tampa Bay, casting a golden glow over the city still wrapped in remembrance. The city hadn't quite gone back to normal. How could it? Every street corner, every billboard, every local diner seemed to carry some echo of the man they had just buried. Children wore Hulkamania shirts to school not because their parents told them to, but because they wanted to feel like heroes. Local newspapers were still publishing tribute pieces. Bars replayed old WrestleMania events in the evenings. And the WWE Universe, they had begun turning grief into gratitude. But for those closest to him, his family, his brothers in the ring, and those who had shared the road with him, it was still hard to breathe. Inside the Hogan family home, the atmosphere was quieter than it had ever been. The laughter, the guitars, the loud TV blaring his matches on loop gone. Brooke sat in the backyard beneath the palm trees, sipping coffee from a mug that read "Brother" in red and yellow letters. It had been one of her father's favorites. She stared off into the morning, her eyes puffy but peaceful. Next to her, Nick placed a small photo album on the patio table, one filled with never-before-seen moments, Christmas mornings, beach days, and birthday parties that most fans never knew happened. They smiled. And they cried, because now they understood that Hulk Hogan, the icon, belonged to the world. But Terry Bollea, that was their dad. Meanwhile, back in Stamford, Vince McMahon sat in his private office alone. The door was closed, the lights dimmed. No meetings. No boardrooms. Just Vince, a framed photo of him and Hogan from the 80s, and a glass of untouched whiskey beside it. For the man who built the WWE empire alongside Hogan's muscle and charisma, this was more than the end of an era. It was the end of the beginning. Vince had watched warriors come and go, stars rise and fall, but Hogan had been the first true pillar. His grief wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The silence said it all. Back at Madison Square Garden, construction crews were working day and night to unveil something never before done in WWE history, a permanent statue, carved in marble of Hulk Hogan mid-flex. With his trademark bandana, his mustache curled into that unmistakable grin, his body cast in motion. At the base of the statue, in gold plating, the inscription read, "He didn't just fight for victory, he fought for the dream. Long live the immortal." WWE announced that the statue would remain in the Garden lobby forever. Tourists, fans, and legends alike would pass it on their way to events. Some would smile, others would weep, and many would stand in awe, facing not just the image of a man, but the weight of his legend. And then, something unexpected happened. Just 9 days after Hogan's funeral, WWE SmackDown went live from Houston, Texas. The crowd was buzzing with energy, but unsure of what to expect. The show opened with a tribute package and a 10-bell salute. Fans held up lights. Chants of "Thank you, Hogan" filled the arena. And then silence. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage, and out walked a young wrestler. No music, no pyro, no theatrics. He wore a red and yellow bandana, a sleeveless leather vest, and black tights with "Immortal" stitched across the leg. He didn't try to impersonate Hogan. He didn't do the taunts. He simply walked to the ring, held the mic in his hand, and looked directly into the camera. "My name," he said, "is Tyson Bolia, and I'm not here to replace anyone. I'm here to honor everything he stood for." The arena erupted. Nobody knew this was coming. Not even the dirt sheets, and yet, in that moment,